We are in a crazy time. Let's just be honest. With the explosion of technology, the capabilities that AI is providing, new capabilities almost every day, enhancements. It is a strange time. At the same time, most of our major metrics, Forrester's CX index, for instance, has record lows. Customer experience is lower in many cases than it's been in the past. And I think, though, it's different there is it's not lower necessarily, it's lower compared to expectations, because expectations are skyrocketing with people who are doing things the right way. Banking, financial service companies, and really any company, they're now not just having to compete with each other, having to compete with Amazon or companies that really get it right and have invested the right kind of capability. And we're in a time where it's decisions that we have today that are going to change probably at least the next decade, because the technology can't survive without the human aspect, and the human aspect now is being dependent on the technology. And so this you're really integration of humanistic technology or the human side of technology is a key decision for most organizations. And what I find in financial services companies that I work with, they get it more than most. They understand that, especially in financial services, it's about building trust and a relationship with the client. Whether you're a bank, whether you're an advisory firm, whether you're a big, platform to provide, stocks and bonds and everything else, the reality is it doesn't matter. That's the money part, but it's about building this relationship. And so we're in this crazy time, and it's only going to get weirder, honestly, as we move forward, because we're going to be balancing that. A lot of companies that I talk to, though, they tend to want to focus more on the technology and overlook the people side. And that's the exact opposite or worst thing they need to do. Patrick, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this is where we need to start separating product and experience, right? And the truth is with, as you mentioned, Amazon is a great example. Amazon thrives because they do both really well. Their core product and offering is extremely good, and their customer experience is extremely good. They try to make it as seamless as possible. And I love your reference to the financial services sector. I think this is an industry that has for a long time understood that both of these things need to work. When we talk with our clients at Hallmark Business Connections, what they tell us is that their product offering is relatively salient. And at the end of the day, the competitive differentiation between all the different folks in that industry when it comes to the product is fairly minimal, right? Everyone's selling different versions of the same thing. Yeah. Where they can differentiate on is experience, right? They can differentiate on building compelling relationships. They can differentiate on showing up in a more interesting and compelling way for their consumers, which obviously is at the end of the day where our products come in. I think it's so interesting as we think about AI going forward. It's going to be a commodity, right? This is not going to be one or two players winning. This is going to be a foundational technology that we can plug into all of our different businesses and our processes to try to make us better and more efficient. One of the things that we're thinking a lot about is how can we make it so that we can still bring a human aspect forward in everything that we're doing, even if it's content and or experiences that are driven by AI. We still want our customers to know that we care about them, right? At the end of the day. And this is where this interesting paradigm shift is, I think, going to take place over the next, let's say, couple of years, somewhere in the 2 to 5 year range, is who within this broader set of industries is going to own the ability to drive both product and experience and use their AI to continue to build a compelling customer experience and a compelling relationship with their customers.
I'm seeing it too on the research side of customer experience. When we look at researching with clients and understanding, what they need, what they want, what drives brand loyalty. And, it is fundamentally everything we're doing now is kind of driven by technology and AI, et cetera. But the more that we're pushing on the customer, the client, the more they're pushing back. And I think you're exactly right, Patrick. You've got to make sure you're balancing that human connection, because otherwise, and granted, I do think there's a future where my AI bot is going to be talking to a company's AI bot, and I'm not going to be a part of it. That's coming. It's already, getting there in a few different smaller scale examples. But I do agree this shift, it's, AI is the new tide, and high tide raises all boats. So everything's going to get, more integrated, more interesting. But now's the time that organizations have to really think about what you just said. They've got to think about it. How do we want to balance the relationship, knowing that technology drives efficiency, but relationship is something different?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was just at a conference recently with some industry peers, and the number one discussion was how AI was driving all sorts of different enhancements and modifications in our business, and specifically in the customer experience, customer service world. And I found it so interesting. When we talk about AI in the product world, we talk about how it's going to make things better for the customer. That conversation is very different right now in the customer experience, customer service world. The conversation is often about efficiencies, right? It's about saving costs. It's about minimizing the amount of time you actually have to have a human representative on the phone. It's about minimizing wrap. All things that are good value adds for the company at the end of the day, and are things that I'm sure most companies are going to appreciate having as a part of the value proposition. But when we think about how we build unique and authentic customer experiences and how we build real relationships, to your point earlier, customers are pushing back on this. They're very clearly communicating right now that may be a wonderful benefit to the companies they work with, but it is in no way helping them build a relationship along the way. And I'm curious to see when this turn might happen, right? When are we as an industry going to realize, similar to how we went through a stage in the broader customer experience world where automation, just in basic call screening and call routing, became a bit of a paradigm shift. And it took us a little while to realize that was not building positive experiences before we started to make modifications and improvements over time. When are we going to have that same journey here, right? When are we going to realize that you still need to build compelling customer relationships in all of your interactions with your customers over time? You need to be clienteling over time. You still need to be building those relationships. It will come eventually, right? All of us figure out where we need to go eventually, and it's just one of these interesting moments right now where it seems like we haven't quite stepped on the that next part of our journey at this point.
We are kind of coming to the other side of, thinking about Gartner's AI hype cycle, or just any of the hype cycles. We are at that height of disillusion, that height of, or we're about to enter the trough of disillusionment. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. We're sky high. Everybody's like, oh, it's going to be great. Going back to what you just said, efficiencies and cost reduction and all of that. And then, the news comes out about different companies and how their chatbots mess things up so bad that they got lawsuits and things like that now. And we're entering that trough. And so to your point of when, if you believe Gartner, it's like 5 to 8 to 10 years before we kind of come back out of that to that more plateau of ongoing value. But we don't have to think, companies don't have to be limited to that, right? That's just the generic use cases. It's about planning and using what's available. And I think it goes back to it, the focus of efficiency is one thing, but going into the topics around personalization, for instance, really driving the ability to say, I'm not just going to create more efficiency. I'm actually going to drive more value using the tools to supplement what I'm already doing, but now have the right offer, the right, routing and treatment, of what's occurring. And I think this is what's really exciting about what's happening right now is this, whether it's AI agentic agents, AI agent assist, whatever you want to what different companies are calling it, but that ability to bridge that gap between the human and the experience by saying, hey, make sure you're personalizing this to them, what's going on with them, where they are. I was on a panel with a guy, he used the term situationalization. It's a mouthful, but it's basically personalization plus it's about the situation. It's very, very detailed into what you're doing. And the only way to do that at scale is AI, is using technology at that level. You got to have all the right data, understand their needs, what they're looking for. Heck, in financial services, things like life events that you can recognize via a card or a product or, through your organization, and being able to really show that, that connection through that. But driven then by the scalability of the current capabilities.
I totally agree. And it's an interesting story, actually, to think about even where our business has been over the last few decades during this evolutionary phase. I can think back to customers that we've worked with over the years who, in the earlier days, would have cards available inside of a store or inside of a place where they'd have regular customer experiences, and they'd be handwriting notes, right? We literally had a clienteling practice back in the day, right? And you had your sales rep at the store. That over the years turned into more automated experiences and software-driven solutions and call centers, or allowing frontline representatives to use phones or iPads to do that kind of clienteling with the communication happening on the back end. And you're right. Clearly, the next phase of this is going to be still an automated pursuit, or a more automated pursuit, I should say, but with the necessary focus on personalization, with the necessary focus on human connection. An automated email that says, "Hi, John, thank you so much for shopping. Here's a 20% off coupon code," might achieve some specific economic benefit for the company that might send it. But what we hear all the time from our customers at Hallmark Business Connections is that is not doing anything to help them drive differentiated experiences. They understand their customers get that email or that text message 72 times a day. And what they're trying to find is, what is the ability, or what ability do we have as large companies engaging with our broad customer set to personalize at scale, right? How can we drive unique customer experiences at scale? Whether that be solutions that Hallmark offers, whether that be solutions that Salesforce offers, right? All the different partner parties and that exists in this space, trying to find ways to bridge these two things together with the kind of original and authentic human connection that we're all looking for, right? At the end of the day.
It's funny. So my birthday was last week, and
happy belated birthday.
Thank you. And I got a lot of emails wishing me happy birthday, text messages. I got a lot of people on LinkedIn, sending me, happy birthday and warm wishes. I didn't get one card from not even from my family. From that perspective. Now, I mean, that's okay because, but yeah, we it's almost like that
you noticed
rotation.
It.
Yeah, absolutely. That over rotation away from, that handwritten note and those connections to that. And it's, it shouldn't be lost on people, right? That business owners and practitioners that just, in some ways, old school is a way to differentiate today than ever before. I kind of talk about it often on some of my keynotes. I talk about the fact that now you can analyze experiences. If you really think about trends of customer experience and really understanding what's going on, you can analyze the experience at scale, because you could track every click. You can track you can track where they're hovering and where they're, on your website. You can track every word they say in a phone call in real time and translate that into, suggestions for the agent who's receiving that call. I mean, you got all of this physical data about what's happening and where they are and what they're buying and what they're doing. You got all of that, and that can be used instead of surveys. Like, when we go back to research, it's like we used to always do surveys because we didn't have that data. Now we don't really need the surveys to do that. What it actually gives us the opportunity, kind of thinking about that, go back to old school, is back to market research, back to conversations,
right?
With clients and customers. And I've been talking to some financial institutions that are really embracing that opportunity to, now you're saying, you've got the data. That's your quant data, your quantitative. Now use the qualitative by having conversations. Hey, we're seeing trends like this. What do you think? And have dialogue. And that reinforces the trust and the connection, and it's part of that kind of the other side of this new age is we're getting so efficiency on the tech side and the data side. Now you can actually spend that time if you decide to. Goes back to what you said earlier. Companies facing efficiencies, they're basically squeezing everything they can out of that. Well, don't give it all back. Use some of it to have that dialogue. Use some of it to send these, these more heartfelt, connections and things of that nature. It's an opportunity to do that, but you got to plan for it, because otherwise, it's not just going to happen. You're going to end up, AI everything if you don't watch out.
Well, let's at least start on the positive side, right? So all of our clients, all of our businesses, we have access to more data than we have ever had at any point in the past. Data on any practical element you could ever have, including, as you said, some of this qualitative data, right? You ask, what do people want? You should go and ask them. That's the good news. I've got bad news. And there's two pieces of bad news. Number one is that somehow we continue to add more and more data capabilities and not data organization. I'll tell you, we all the time hear from our customers. Hallmark Business Connections will bring forward a great idea for how they could engage better with their customers, their employees. What do we hear? I don't know if I could get you that data, right? It's not that they don't have it. It's that they don't know if we could get it to us, right? This is data organization, this fundamental problem of it doesn't matter how much data you have. If it's not in an organized and understandable kind of position, you're not going to be able to do anything with it. But to your second point, I think it comes down to enablement, right? Of our frontline associates, people who interact with customers on a day-to-day basis, and giving them not just the tools, but the permission to say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to engage. I'm going to use the data and understanding that I have to build better relationships in the most impactful ways. Your story about your birthday last week reminded me. Just recently, we had a client in the financial services and in kind of insurance space, and they came to us and they said, well, we want to tell you this incredible story that I'm sure you're not going to believe. And of course, the truth is, given the customers that we work with and the work that we do, we hear it practically every week. But they told us that one of their frontline associates just recently had sent a birthday card to one of their customers who was about 102 years old, and fairly standard practice in their business. But this gentleman, let's call him John for the sake of giving him a name, came in to the office the next day to personally thank the business for sending him a birthday card, and specifically thank the frontline associate for sending him a birthday card. And of course, shared the story that at the end of the day, it was the only birthday card that he had received that year, right? And it made him feel so incredible. And in this case, that's, a customer. I think he had been a customer for 30 or 40 years at that point, right? But he affirmed to the business that touch point meant everything. And it's funny because the firm that we work with, that the underlying information and reality is that they know anything and everything about this gentleman. After 30 years as a customer, they could practically predict the next word that's going to come out of his mouth. But the most impactful thing that they were able to do was take a moment and just remind him, happy birthday, right? We're here for you. If you need anything, give us a call. And it's one of these small reminders. Again, we have the benefit at Hallmark all the time of hearing these kinds of stories and knowing the power of the work and the power of these kinds of perfectly timed, thoughtful messages that can be surprising to customers, but it makes all the difference, right? And it's the thing that businesses can do to try to set themselves apart.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What are you seeing as some of the biggest opportunities, or I guess value, not more so when you look at that? I mean, obviously that one story is a great example of a one-to-one. Yeah. What are you seeing when it comes to actually broader impact, with the companies that use your products?
Yeah, the benefit of what we do at Hallmark is that we can help businesses make the same kind of connection, one-to-one and one-to-million. The customer's, relationship with the company and their interaction that we help design is going to feel the same, regardless of the scale at which we're operating. Another story. Just a couple of years ago, we had a retail partner that we worked with who said, "I want to send a thank you note to all of my best customers. I have all this shopper data. I know everything about them, but I don't have the ability to write them each a handwritten note saying thank you so much. Right? It means so much to me that you come in the store." And we said, hey, great, we can make that happen, right? We can help you personally thank 1 million customers, and every single one of them is going to think that you had sent them a handwritten note because in a manner of speaking, you did, right? And we didn't quite know exactly what would come back from that, but we got, in this case, Emily, we got her card out in the mail, and she got hundreds of pieces of mail back from her customers, hundreds and hundreds, and they were handwritten notes coming back saying, thank you so much for sending me this note. And as you can imagine, right, as we talked about data, we had customers shopping in the store, coming in for additional trips, right? I mean, all of the return on investment math was there. But the thing that mattered most to Emily and frankly to the retailer was this sudden realization that they could build differentiated relationships with their customers with this one little thing, right? With this one personalized note in the mail. It's so difficult to kind of build that bridge from a company out to a customer. It's one thing when the customer's calling in and they're upset, right? Or they have a complaint, or they have an issue. But to be able to build that bridge in a positive manner, it's a really kind of incredible feature. And I think it's inherent to the Hallmark brand and the brand promise that of course we have, that we're able to help companies build that relationship with their customers. Little funny anecdote or period on that story. One of the gentlemen that started that had written a handwritten note back, Emily found his note so engaging, she decided to write him back again. And she sent him a thank you note, and they actually developed a bit of a pen pal relationship over the years, and have continued to stay in touch. And like I said, we've got tons and tons of stories that rhyme and sound just like that. And it just speaks to the power of personalization, the power of the Hallmark brand, and really the power of that unexpected, thoughtful touch point, right? It's not a sales email. It's not a come in for Valentine's Day special offer. It's, hey, we're thinking of you, and we just want you to know that you matter to us. And those little things can just make all the difference.
When you look at that, and because obviously, yes, the stories and the content. How do you see companies measuring the impact more from a return on investment? What kind of metrics are you seeing your products helping those companies drive up and improve upon?
Well, so it's twofold, right? And I met recently, actually, this was not recently, a couple of years ago. I met a couple of years ago with the CFO of one of our customers. It's a customer who had bought and licensed our Care customer service software. It's software that's deployed within their customer service and customer experience teams to do clienteling, like we've been talking about, right? One-to-one, impactful, in-the-moment communication. And we asked him, here's how much you paid in effect for this software last year. What do you think about it, right? What did you get from it? And, it's interesting what he said. He first went to the qualitative pieces, right? He went to, we got X many additional amounts of revenue. We retained more customers, which means this much in lifetime value, right? But then where he finished was the more interesting thing for me. He said, to be honest with you, and I probably shouldn't tell you this, I would have paid 3 times as much, because what it enabled for us to do is to be able to walk into the C-suite and walk into the boardroom and not just tell a story of negative customer experience. It gave us the ability to walk in and say, we are building compelling customer relationships, right? And we have an incredible partner in Hallmark, obviously, helping us do that. And they brought forward, as you can imagine, all sorts of stories, right? Of sending someone a birthday card, and it's the only card they got that year. Sending a veteran a Happy Veterans Day card, and a number of different members of the VFA writing back and saying, thank you so much for remembering us and thinking about us. And many, many more that sound just like that. It's a balance of both, right? Our customers tell us all the time, it's not terribly hard in this world of data that we live in to prove some type of quantitative return on investment. And, like I said, increased sales, customer retention, lifetime value are great examples of that. But the qualitative piece is the piece that matters, right? I remember we had an associate of ours who was speaking at a conference once, and she came up with this interesting line that I thought was interesting, which was, if you were a utility company, as an example, right? You're an electric company. Do you think you could pay a customer to write you out of the blue and genuinely compliment you on how good your customer experience is? And most of the utilities that happened to be at this conference said, no, we literally don't think we could pay them to do that, right? And yet that's exactly, in effect, what is happening here, right? We're sending out thoughtful notes. Customers are telling us that they so much appreciate the firm and the experience that they're trying to have. And it's, how do I put a number on that? I can't, right? I can't put a number on that qualitative experience. I can try to touch on it on the quantitative side, but the ability to drive that kind of relationship and engagement is just so unique, right? It's the kind of thing that I won't say it's impossible to do it with an email or SMS, but it's exceptionally difficult. But there's something about putting that message and that intent in a Hallmark card that gives it permission, right? And gives a customer and a company or an employee in their company kind of permission to build a different kind of relationship that's very unique.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I'm gonna pull a couple of strings there. Sure. I mean, one is, and this is, what we're really kind of talking about is, especially when you think about measurement and ROI. Now, unfortunately, in the customer experience space, over the last 18 months to 2 years, layoffs have been rampant, just like in tech, and mainly because there was very little ROI. Right. That a lot of people, and this is what I like to kind of describe as, it's the difference between the noun and the verb forms of CX. The noun form of CX, customer experience, is surveys. It's a physical activity. It's much more quant, and it's driven more in many cases even as a label. Yes, CX department. which don't get me started on the fact that that's so misunderstood by most organizations, because those two letters, CX and actually the two letters CX and AI are the most misunderstood letters in the alphabet based on how people are interpret them. But so they think that, a lot of people are focused too much on CX is a department. It's a process. It's a thing. And while there is truth to that, that's the noun version. The real power is in CX as the verb. It's the actual experience. It's what they experience, how they feel, the emotions, et cetera. And to your point, you've got to be able to balance that, and even in those who are getting, maybe getting challenged because they don't have a lot of ROI, what you're highlighting for them, if they're listening, is, but where are your stories? Do you have the emotional? Because, and it's not just even for your customers, it's for the rest of your employees. Because, I think the statistic I heard recently was only 28% of managers could name three of their company's strategic priorities for the year. Because we don't remember lists. We don't remember, stats or bullets or things like that. We remember stories because they tap into the heart and the mind, and in some cases the soul of a person, and that's what we've been doing for millennia as humans. We've been telling stories, and it's like I like to joke. It's like Caesar didn't get Rome to establish over all of the known world basically by his strategic bullet points for how we're going to conquer the world. No, it was it was the heroes and legends, and that really inspired the countrymen. And that's sometimes that missing point. It goes right back into what you were saying is, it's for your employees, but then ultimately it's about your customers, and using the power of that is key. And you really highlighted something that a lot of companies are missing out on as well.
Yeah. Let me give a little bit of kudos to a utility company that's in the greater Phoenix area called Salt River Project. They're really an incredible customer service practice. And to your point about not just having bullet points on a PowerPoint slide, but really owning their focus on customer experience. It's so interesting when you visit their building, you can't miss it. When you walk in the door, they proudly display on the wall all of the customer service and customer experience awards that they have won over the years. They take it as a point of pride that it is a core element in how they go to market. It's a core element and part about how they distinguish themselves from a customer service lens. And when you talk with their employees, especially in the customer service center, they'll tell you that the training there at SRP is different. Right, that it's not just about wrap time. It's not just about systems. It's not just about making sure you understand how your phone system works. No, it's about here's what we're trying to accomplish when we build our relationships with our customers. And obviously, we've been partners with SRP for a number of years now, and they're using our care software there. But we were an add-on to an already solidified, incredible practice there. And I find over the years, as we work with many different types of companies, different types of banks, financial services, insurance, et cetera. Typically, when we walk in the door, we know pretty fast whether or not a company is serious about customer experience, because it's not about it being, a tier or a column on the slide. It's about it's a part of who they are. Ally Bank is an example, another customers for ours here at Hallmark. I don't think there's any Ally customer in the world who would not say what is one of Ally's top corporate initiatives and say, well, customer experience is probably really high up there, right? You can see it in the way that they live their brand and the way that they go about kind of enunciating and acting on their business strategy on an everyday basis, which makes the difference. Even if it is just words, it makes the difference, right? Because all of their associates and their customers hear it, and they understand the expectation at the end of the day. And I think it makes all the difference. At least it does strategically.
Yeah. What's the saying? Lipstick on a pig? Is that, if the wrong company using the right strategy, like your product, isn't going to win, it's not going to work for them, because it's got to be part of their DNA, if you will. And it's got to be part of where they focus. And in fact, I think that's where, when we think about where we're going, as organizations, we've lost our ground because of that. I mean, we've focused less on, our customers as people, even though we're customers. And it's an amazing dynamic, that can even be possible, but it absolutely is becoming, reality in most cases. But, you have to have a culture. I mean, it's all about, culture. It's about process. I like to say it's about people, process, and platforms. you have to hit at all three levels, but you don't start with platforms. So we've started this conversation around technologies and AI and things like that, but that's actually the last thing a company should do. You start with your people, as you've described, the training and the education, and winning them over to that culture and the strategy, and the stories you're able to tell to do that, and then it's process reinforcing. All right, make the processes so those people that you got in line and are ready to go are going to be successful. Then you can think about the platforms. Yeah. Versus, and that's the ready, aim, fire approach. Whereas a lot of companies go fire, aim, ready, or fire, ready. It's like, it just kind of becomes a little bit backwards if they go the wrong direction. And it's got to be a bigger culture shift, which also, unfortunately, scares people off. Right. I really have to do all these things right. Well, eventually, yeah, but there are definitely things you can do. And I think a lot of the stories you told and what you've described can actually get companies there, sooner and faster, at least a leg up, if you will, by making that connection better.
And that's what we do, right? That's the fundamental mission of what Hallmark Business Connections is trying to be this rock for our customers to build on. Speaking of, this reminds me that the four rocks, this might be the perfect place to transition to this, right? I mean, help me understand this. I feels like this underlying process, if you will, and this practice that you've tried to develop here is maybe exactly what we're talking about, right? How can we build some fundamental places for us to transform what we're trying to do from a customer experience perspective, whether it's in our DNA or not?
Yeah, I mean, it all started for me. So like I said, I've been doing customer experience for 25 years plus, but this started. It was about 2008. And I live here in Colorado, so love the mountains, whitewater rafting, hiking, climbing 14ers. Those are mountains over 14,000 feet. Okay. That's a big mountain, at least for the main part of the U.S. So love it, and I've been here since '96 and really love it. But and so our boys, I have 3 sons, and we always like to go to Rocky Mountain National Park. And so we were at the park. And I was still, I'm on the weekend with my family, but I've got this thing in my head about a problem at work. And because we were going through and we were trying to find ways to wow. This is back when delight, it was all about delighting your customers, which it's okay to do that. But, but what I was sitting there and I've got that going on my head, and we're down by the river, the Big Thompson River. My youngest son looks at me, he says, "Dad, why does this river not flow straight? Why does it, wind around so much?" And I was going to make something up, and I sound very confident. So, because he didn't have a smartphone, he couldn't check me on that. So, and then my oldest son over by the river, he's like, "Oh, it's the rocks. We learned about that in school. The rocks get in the way and they cause the river to have to go back and forth instead of straight. They get in the way and then there's erosion and it picks up little rocks and deposits them and all that." And I just had this aha moment, this epiphany that said, we were trying to find delight at work. And the reason we were struggling so much is because we were running into the rocks in the journey. Because if we think about it, the customer journey now is not a task. It's not a single event. The journey is exactly that. It's over touch points and time. And if you look at when things are bad, it's usually a multi-step, multi-pronged journey across different touch, website, chatbots, phone, et cetera. So the reality is, the journey is rough, and it's these rocks that get in the way. And so I, through the years, had developed this way to identify these pain points, because data proves when something is hard for a customer, when they say it's hard. It used to be back in 2013 when the book, The Effortless Experience, was published, someone was 4 times more likely to be disloyal if something was hard. When I was doing this, back in the 2020s, actually probably by 2019 and 2020, it was like 6 to 7%. So something hard, 6 to 7% more likely to be disloyal. Now, last year's 2024 data from the research my company did, it's 13 times more likely. Something's hard, 13 times more likely. So no matter what you try to do, these really positive experiences like these cards and the connection, if you're messing up on the journey, if you're creating that because too many rocks in the journey, that's the problem. So my method is really about, leveraging data and analytics and insights to find those key pain points and opportunities, remove them so the journey can be smoother and more successful. But it ultimately then opens the door for everything we're talking about here. because again, it goes back to, it's about the verb of customer experience, about everything that, that goes into it. But AI is helping us do that, connecting through, traditional sources like mail and cards. These are all part of that journey. Yeah. And honestly, if you think about, a really bad experience, if I got a horrible experience, but I got a handwritten card from someone that said, I am so sorry, this is not what we like to do, you would have won me over. You would have been able, because nobody does that. Right. Yeah. So it's not just about rewarding someone on an anniversary or a birthday or something like that. It's owning up and taking, hey, we didn't provide the service, the experience that we expect of ourselves, and we're really sorry. And, thank you for staying with us. That, can be so much more powerful as well in that context.
Yeah. It's having been in this industry like you, we've worked with our clients for years. I'm sure you've had the same experience. You work with a customer and they spend all this time and money on a customer journey map. They bring in consultants. They've got the big whiteboard. They call all the meetings. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars are spent. And then it gets printed up. It gets put in a file and everybody walks out of it and says, hey, good job, everybody. We got that customer journey map all done. But nothing comes out of it from that, right? We're not trying to think about how we influence service recovery, to your point. We're not trying to think about how we handle welcome and attrition, right? And maybe we touch on a couple of different aspects of that customer journey where we think we can drive ROI, but we don't think about the customer's life cycle. We don't really think about, to your point, all these little rocks that are going to happen throughout that journey where are going to be points where the customer can get disillusioned and leave or attrit. And you're right. You're exactly right. It's this ability to intersect at all of these right times. That is what matters, right? We have an insurance company that we've worked with for a long time. And what's always been so impressive to me is that they've owned their customer journey map. They know exactly what it is. They can tell you exactly how long it takes a customer to be profitable. They can tell you the cost of attrition, not just the cost of acquisition, the cost of attrition for any of their underlying customers. And they empower all of their workforce that has any kind of customer interaction to say, we need to get this customer from here to here. And we have to own our communication and a positive brand experience all the way through. And they're constantly revisiting every single one of those touch points to think about how can we make this better. And to be clear, they're not all Hallmark touch points, right? Hallmark and a Hallmark greeting card is a tool in a toolkit, right? We exist for very specific purposes across a customer lifecycle, but it's that practice. It's that practice of really and truly owning the customer experience front to back. Yes, intersecting with Hallmark cards, but also making sure you're intersecting with real human touch points of many different kinds throughout the journey. To your point, try to make sure that the customer feels that you're engaged, no matter how positive or negative that experience is at any given moment.
Yeah. And one of the steps, because I was just 2 weeks ago, we did a journey mapping exercise with a company, and my business partner, one of my partners and I, Dave Seaton, we were doing that. And Dave likes to say this. It's like, if, a journey map without action is just an art project. All the colors and the stickies, it's just an art project, but you've got to take the action. And, and as you go through that process, it's about mapping it, identifying the pain points, but then it's about future state. Now it's about, okay, well, what should it be? And this is where your product comes in to stay. Where do I sprinkle in the value of a product like Hallmark to say, where can I either recover faster from, when something will go wrong, because it will, or recognition of, et cetera. So you've got to think about that as well, and not just, remove the rocks. You got to remove the rocks and then find the places where, adds more value too. Absolutely.
It's so interesting. Well, first off, I have to say, as the Hallmark is the parent company of Crayola as well, so we will sponsor the art project and we'll sponsor the follow through. Okay, we can handle both sides. Yeah, but it's funny actually. I was just thinking here. We once met with a credit card company, a bank, and this is essentially the setup of the conversation we had. They had asked us to come in and tell us, where can you help? Right? Where can you fit? And we had lots of different ideas and all these different, potential touch points and things that we could help them improve, remove those rocks where necessary, or at the very least, make sure that we are there when someone inevitably hits it. But, the most compelling thought that we had actually coming into the meeting that we used was, one of the members of our team was a long-time card holder for this specific institution. He'd been there for a long, long time, 20-something years. So we got into the meeting and the executive is sitting there and says, okay, tell me all your great ideas. And he's like, well, good news. I've been with you guys for 20 years or something, and I just celebrated my 20th anniversary. Would you like to know what you gave me for my 20th anniversary? And the executive looked so excited, right? He had a smile on his face, right? And the answer was a bill. You gave me a bill for my 20th anniversary. And it was the reason why that matters when I think about, especially the financial services industry, is a reminder that every single one of these touch points matter, even if we'd love to believe they don't, right?
Yeah.
When you think about charting out those rocks that can happen within that journey, I think we often underestimate how many there are, right? The simple ability for a company to understand what's happening in that customer journey, even if it just means trying to intersect in these little ways and make sure that the customer understands that they're being thought of, can matter so much. This gets back to the idea of the birthday or customer anniversary card. But from our standpoint, we think of it as there are essentially business touch points and there are life touch points. Both can matter, right? A person's birthday is important, but so is their anniversary with their company. Wishing someone good luck because you happen to know within your data set that they're getting married is incredibly important. So is reminding them that they have a certain level of benefit structure with your company, and if they don't take advantage of those benefits, they might lose them. All of these things matter within the broader customer journey. And it is interesting, as we talked about, right, as you think about the idea of ROI, right, and all this data and quantitative information that we have, that these little things can be forgotten or overlooked, but they matter, right? Within that customer journey, they can matter, and any single one of them can be that impediment that's going to derail that customer experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Sean, we meet with customers all the time, right? We've got partners, we've got clients at the end of the day, and it's always very interesting to us to try to get them together in different formats to share experience, to do some, their best practices, their training. What kinds of things are you seeing in your space that kind of fit in that arena?
Yeah, well, I mean, customer experience is a team sport because it takes everyone at an organization to create the experience because it's so complex these days. Yeah. And we talked earlier about it's got to be part of the culture. It's got to be built in. I'm actually launching a community. It's called CX on the Rocks Collective. And we're kind of playing a little bit on the rocks as in things are a little bit choppy. I mentioned earlier that the scores are lower than they've been. And, people, even from a career perspective and so forth, it's a little bit rough. But the flip side of that is, and you talked about, I think you kind of even used the term building on a rock. The opportunity is if we build this stuff on the rocks, it's going to be more solid, not the sand, from the old parable. So it's this opportunity for practitioners and leaders and executives of all parts of an organization to join and learn about what is today's expectations around experience from the consumer side and customer side. And not only that, but what's happening, because I'm in this day in and day out, and I'm still not abreast of all the things that are changing around us because it's changing so fast. So this collective, come to see, visit the website, cxontherocks.com, no spaces, and learn a little bit more, but join us. We're learning together. We're going to grow together, and we're going to basically, turn this verb of customer experience into a very positive for, really for all of us, both as employees and as customers as well. So yeah, thank you for letting me share a little bit about that.
Of course.